Most of us are actually living two different lives. There is the life we live every day, the one consumed by the commute, the emails, and the chores. And then there is the unlived life, the fully realized version of ourselves dreaming beneath the surface. Standing between those two lives is an invisible, repelling force. It's a toxic energy field that exists for one single reason: to shove us away from our work and keep us exactly where we are. This force is called resistance. The cruelest trick of resistance is how it chooses its targets. Like a magnetized needle, it unfailingly points to true north. Whenever you attempt an action vital to your soul, writing a book or launching a business, resistance violently repels you from it. When facing this force, our default human condition is to act as an amateur. The amateur treats their true calling as a hobby, something to be pursued only when the mood strikes or the conditions feel perfect. We don't fail to realize our potential because we lack time, talent, or luck. We fail because we don't recognize that resistance is a lethal, daily enemy, and we step onto the battlefield completely unprepared. Resistance rarely shows up as outright terror. It is far too cunning for that. Instead, it feeds the amateur a steady diet of rationalizations. It offers highly logical, entirely valid-sounding excuses for why the work should be put off until tomorrow. You might genuinely have a demanding household and zero free time, but Leo Tolstoy had 13 children, and he still wrote War and Peace. You might face severe physical hurdles. Lance Armstrong endured debilitating cancer treatments, yet he still trained to win the Tour de France. External circumstances, no matter how daunting, are ultimately just obstacles to be navigated. Action is a choice. When rationalization fails, the amateur creates distractions. They generate fake drama, fall into compulsive habits, or spend years healing themselves, all to avoid facing the blank page. But the amateur's most fatal flaw is a profound misunderstanding of fear. They believe they need to conquer their self-doubt before they can begin. They wait for the anxiety to fade. By waiting for the fear to subside or for inspiration to strike, the amateur guarantees their own defeat. Resistance wins without even having to throw a punch, simply because the amateur never steps into the ring. The antidote to the amateur paradigm is hidden in plain sight. We already know how to beat resistance because we do it every day at our regular jobs. We show up no matter what, we stay on the clock, and we work for pay. Beating the enemy requires turning pro. This means stripping away all the mystical preciousness surrounding your art or your calling and treating it as manual, blue-collar labor. Looking at this split-screen visualization, we see the stark difference in their operating rhythms. On one side is an erratic, steep wave crashing into burnout. That's the amateur relying on bursts of enthusiasm. On the other side is a steady, flat, continuous line. That is the professional's relentless, unromantic pacing, extending day after day. The professional does not wait for inspiration. When asked if he wrote on a schedule or only when struck by a muse, Somerset Maugham replied that he wrote only when inspiration struck, but fortunately, it struck every morning at 9 o'clock sharp. The professional is just as terrified as the amateur. Even at 75 years old, the legendary Henry Fonda still threw up in his dressing room before going on stage. The difference is that he cleaned himself up and marched out into the lights anyway. The creative process is an active war zone. The professional embraces the misery of isolation, rejection, and self-doubt. Like a Marine, they take a perverse pride in deploying military-grade endurance to survive conditions that would break anyone else. Turning pro is an act of sheer will. You don't outsmart resistance. You beat it simply by being more implacable, more patient, and far more stubborn than the enemy itself. Eventually, every creator faces rejection and failure. The professional survives this gauntlet by creating a massive psychological distance between their personal ego and their creative instrument. Madonna does not walk around her house in stage costumes identifying as a global pop icon. She assesses her body, her voice, and her talent coldly and objectively. She employs the public persona of Madonna to do a job. When criticism arrives, the pro evaluates it without taking it personally. They refuse to let external rejection reinforce the internal resistance that's already trying to sabotage them. Consider Tiger Woods at the Masters. When a fan snapped a camera shutter at the very top of his backswing, he didn't fly into a rage or cast himself as a victim of bad luck. He stopped, reset, maintained complete emotional sovereignty over the moment, and hit the ball right down the middle. By corporatizing themselves into Myself Inc., the professional shields their soul. When a project bombs or a client walks away, the blow strikes the business entity. The core self remains completely untouched, ready to clock in again tomorrow. Resistance is a lethal enemy, but we must understand the source of its lethality. It has no engine of its own. It functions like a shadow cast by our potential. The strength it possesses is just the energy we provide through our hesitation. When the professional stops negotiating and begins the work, the shadow dissipates. Replacing fear with physical action cuts the supply line, keeping it alive. Once the noise of self-sabotage falls silent, we find ourselves in a new psychological space. This is the higher realm, the state where the professional's discipline finally meets the muse's inspiration. This realm refuses to whisper to the amateur. It only reveals itself to those who have already strapped on the harness and started plowing the field. You have to prove you are ready to receive the ideas. This is why true professionals often deflect personal worship. When reporters pressed John Lennon about his genius, he deflected with sarcasm. He knew the part of him writing the songs was separate, a sacred channel the work flowed through, not something his ego created alone. Resistance never permanently dies. Fear will wake up in your bed with you every single morning, but making the cold-blooded daily choice to lace up your boots and sit down to work is all it takes to win the war.